Let's get started by talking about some simple yet very effective ways to add visual complexity to your pattern designs. So I've got a file started here. I set up my artboard at 8 by 8 inches, just like I normally do. Yours can be whatever size you like. It doesn't have to be 8 by 8, but that's kind of my preferred size for whatever reason that I've been using for years. What I always do first is create my background square, just so I have some color that I'm working on. It can be white. It doesn't have to be a color. White is totally fine too, but I like just having this starting point. And then we will lock it so we can't accidentally move it around. We want it to stay put. And then these are the sketches that I'm going to be working with in this course. So I just copied those and I'm pasting them in. The keyboard shortcuts for copy and paste are Command C and Command V, in case you are not aware of that. Very useful. Okay, so let me shrink these down a little. And I always just move these off to the side so they're not in my way as I'm actually setting up my pattern. I can just kind of move things over as needed. And I'll just start with one. What I'm going to do is just quickly kind of go through and color these. And if you have any questions about how I'm actually coloring these, I go into a lot of detail in how to image trace and live paint and actually color your motifs in Pattern Camp Level 1. So you can check that out as you please or as you need. So for now, you can watch me do some quick coloring with I've got my color palette in my swatches palette already, so I'm just gonna go through and color some of these motifs, and then we'll get to the business of making it more complex. And you can always fill areas with no color, so that'll make it transparent. So if you didn't want that white there, or you didn't want an outline, that's a trick that I often use. So before I continue, the most obvious way to make a pattern more complex is just to actually have more going on within the pattern. So if you watched the last video, the refresher about how to create a straight repeat, you would have seen that I created a very simple straight repeat with just this one flower motif over here repeated over and over. And so while that can make a nice simple design, it's not very complex because it's just one shape repeated over and over. So obviously the more shapes and the more motifs you've got going on within your pattern tile here, the more complex it's actually going to be. So, and then there are ways to add complexity with those shapes and motifs that you've put in by rotating and reflecting things, which is what we're going to do next. So I'm just going to keep moving these over and coloring them with my paint bucket tool and other tools here. Oops. For some reason, when I image trace these shapes that I've drawn, these I drew, some of these I drew on the iPad Pro, it traces them, image traces them in kind of funny ways rather than them being all stuck together. It's got these little bits that have to be colored in separately. Not sure why, but anyway, that can all be fixed later as well if there are little straggly black bits or something like that. Okay. Okay, and then I think I will select this. I've got my motif and my dark blue selected here. I'm going to go up to the color wheel. This is my favorite thing in Illustrator, and I'm actually just going to change all of the black to this dark blue by taking the dark blue and dragging it onto the black there. So sometimes that takes a couple of tries, and I'm not actually loving how that looks. I might try the yellow. Don't love that either. Okay, that'll work for now. And then we'll deselect the dark blue. I'm holding down my shift key to deselect just that. And then let's select this red here. I'm going to change the white. And sometimes it takes 2 drags for some reason to make it actually work. There we go. Okay, so let's keep going. Another quick, easy way to recolor motifs is to simply select it and then click on a color in your color palette. All right, moving right along. Okay. So this one, so I've got the white here and the black. If I select all of it and just click color, it fills in the whole thing, which can be very useful. Actually, as we're adding complexity, it can be very useful. But for now, what I'm going to do, I find the quickest and easiest way, rather than using my paint bucket tool to go and fill those individual petals one at a time, is to select the two colors over here that I want to use. How about those two? So with all three of those things selected, I'll click on my Recolor Artwork tool, and you can click here to add those colors in. For some reason, black and white don't show up. And then drag these colors onto the black and white and see how that looks. So I don't love that. Another fun trick is to select it and change or choose the color wheel again, and you can just drag these colors to switch them. That's a little bit better. Click OK. Okay, so we've got everything colored. So let's start making this pattern complex and visually beautiful. So the first way that you can add complexity in a really simple way is to copy motifs and make them a different color. So again, you can just keep it selected, choose a color in your color palette, deselect, and that's that. And you can do that with every single motif if you want to. This is a really quick and easy way to make it look like there's a lot more going on than there might actually necessarily be. So let's change, I want to add more of that orange in. So I'm going to change the blue or the turquoise to that orange instead. Okay. And again, to copy these, I'm just holding down my Option key and clicking, holding, and dragging, and then changing the color. And this one will be a little bit trickier. So again, you can, with your paint bucket tool selected, you can go around and do the same thing again, just clicking on each area that you want to fill. You can also select it and then select all the colors that you want to use in your changes and click the color wheel tool, and then simply drag the colors from the left to where you want them to be instead on the right. Hopefully that makes sense. So it can be a little bit tricky if you're trying to change a bunch of colors at the same time, just trying to keep track of what's actually going on. But the more you practice with this, see, I just made a mistake. The more you practice with this, the easier it will get to see what you're actually doing. Okay, so that's almost the way I want it. So I'm going to select that. I'm going to just switch around a couple of colors, maybe these two, and see how that looks. Don't love that either. Let's try. There we go. That'll work. So you can see how fun this Recolor Artwork tool is and how easy it is to actually make it look like you're creating new motifs, when in reality you're just doing a couple clicks of your mouse and changing some colors around. All right, so everything is kind of copied and recolored. So now we're going to start adding some complexity in different ways. So I just copied that one again. I'll change the color. And if you hover over these corners, you can see I can click, hold, and drag to rotate. And if I hold down my Shift key, I can click, hold, and drag that shape to become larger or smaller. So those are the shortcuts. The other way that you can do something like that, let me copy this one, is to come over here and choose the rotate tool in the toolbar, and then you don't have to look for that little curvy arrow. You can just simply drag it around. Or the scale tool here, which if you click on that, it will scale or shrink your design however you move your mouse. If you hold down, oops, let me undo that, Command Z. If you hold down your Shift key while you're doing that, it will scale it up or down proportionally. You can also double click on the scale tool and shrink or expand, or shrink or enlarge something a specific amount. So perhaps I want that to be 80% of the size that it currently is. So I can just type in that percentage and it'll shrink it right down for me. And then again, you can just rotate, move things around. I'm going to copy this one, hold down my Option key, change the color. We do that again. So you can see at this point it's just sort of I'm just trying to fill up the space, and then we'll get to kind of the finessing part and moving things around. Another fun trick for adding complexity is the reflect tool, which is hidden here under the rotate tool. So if you hold on that, a little menu fans out and you can choose the reflect tool. And then if you double click on it, you have these options where you can reflect something vertically or horizontally or at some other kind of angle. I'll just show you how the vertical reflect works. So it basically just, if you picture it being a mirror image across a vertical axis, that's kind of what that does. And maybe it'll be more obvious actually with a different kind of shape. Let's see, like maybe this one. So we'll shrink that down, and then I will copy it, paste it in front, double click here on the reflect tool. We'll reflect it vertically, click OK. So you can see now I've got a couple of mirror imaged motifs there. So that can be really useful if you want to do more than rotate it, but actually want to reflect your shape so it's facing a different direction. Those I'm actually just going to delete. This I feel like could be a useful shape for that, so I could just, let's see, copy, Command C, paste in front, Command F, and then we'll reflect that. So you can see that's a fun way to, instead of having to draw this kind of stem and make it perfectly symmetrical, you can just draw the one side and then reflect it and it looks perfect. So that's a fun trick. Maybe we'll go like that. You can also group those together so they're stuck together, Command G. Okay, so let's keep going, just kind of filling up this space and using these basic ideas of copying, pasting, reflecting, rotating, scaling, that kind of thing to make our design look pretty complex. You can see once this is done, it's going to feel like there's a lot more going on than there might actually be when you go to count motifs or, you know, try to figure out how the repeat is actually put together. Let's just finish this up quickly. Not every motif has to be different either. It can be helpful if you put the same motif in the same colorway in the same color in different parts of the design too. Like for example, once you get more seasoned at this and you've created a lot of repeats, you'll notice when something in your design might stick out in a funny way. Like for example, I've got only one of these kind of light grayish stem or leaf shapes kind of floating by itself. So I might want to copy that, hold down my Option key there and reflect it, and then put it somewhere else so it's not all by its lonesome. That'll just help with the general flow of the pattern. And you'll see as I'm designing, I'm just kind of shifting things around as I put new shapes in different places. And with this kind of tossed design, that's what I would call this type of design. That's going to be something that you find yourself doing very, very often. So one thing that I'm also noticing that I'm doing, since I'm not paying as much attention as I do if I'm designing just without talking through what I'm doing, is in the last video I talked about how when I design, I stick to the left side and the top edge. I have a couple of things overlapping over the right edge here, so I'm just going to start to kind of move these over and wiggle things around a little bit so I can show you the right way, or the way that I typically do my designing. Okay, so we'll move these over here. Okay, all right, that might work out a little bit better. Okay, so now that this is mostly full, I'm just going to copy everything over here. So these shapes are overlapping, so I'm going to move them horizontally over 8, vertically 0, and copy them. Okay, so you can see I already have this overlapping in a funny way, so I can just move that into a different area. And I'll select these and do the same thing, but I'll move them horizontally 0 and vertically 8. Copy those down, and again I have some funny overlaps, so I'll just do a little bit of moving things around so they fit nicely. And then this one I'd like to move up, but I've already copied it over, so I want to actually move both of those at the same time. There we go. And let's do the same thing here. So anything that you're moving on the left side, you want to be moving on the right side also. Otherwise your pattern won't match up from edge to edge and it won't repeat seamlessly, which is obviously what we're after. So let's see, we're getting close. This isn't going to be the most beautiful design, but it's going to work for our purposes here. So again, what I was saying before about having designs that are kind of standing by themselves that might end up looking a little obvious once our repeat is finished and we're testing it out. This one is a pretty bold floral design that's all by itself, so I'm actually going to copy that one too. So it's not all by itself. Having 1 or 2 or 3 of a design within your pattern tile can often help with just the spacing and the visual flow of a design, if that makes sense. And you'll see what I'm talking about once we finish this guy up. Okay. And as you can see, I'm just kind of moving things around till they look and feel the way that I want them to. And it's hard to describe how to know when a design is actually finished. It's just a feeling that you'll get as you improve your skills and as you practice a lot. You'll just get that feeling like, oh, that's in the right spot. It's like putting together a puzzle. That's always how I think about designing patterns. You'll notice as you move things around that colors are not looking quite right, so you might want to shift some colors around, move things. Just do that until you get to that aha moment where everything looks like it's in the right place. Okay, so this guy is looking a little bit lonely, so I might just copy that, shrink it down, rotate it. You'll see this has become kind of second nature for me because I've done this so many times, but don't worry if you're having trouble with the keyboard shortcuts or which keys to push. Just go slowly and it'll get easier and faster over time, I promise. Okay, and I think what I might do is, let me copy this one too, and I'm going to go ahead and delete that. Let's put this one up here. The other thing that I didn't do is rotate that one. So you'll see I'm just kind of making these decisions on the fly as I go, and I'm going to copy this down. 8, copy. Okay, so that might make that this design look a little bit better. And then I need some more of this maroon color, I'm thinking. So let's maybe change that one. Okay. We're getting close to being able to test this out. Okay, let's do it. It's not going to be the most stunning pattern, but it's going to be something more complex than the one in the last video. Okay, so the first thing we'll need to do is unlock that background square. We will copy it, paste it in back, take out all the colors, so it's that magical blank magic square that we need. Just for good measure, I often just make sure that it's all the way in the back by going to Object Arrange, Send to Back, because if it's not all the way in the back, your design will not work. And then we will select everything by clicking, holding, and dragging with the black arrow tool selected, and drag it over and drop it into the swatches palette. And alternatively, with everything selected, you can also go to Object, Pattern, Make, and that will work as well. And then let's move over here a little bit and test it out and see what we've got going on. So I make a big square and fill it with my pattern swatch that I just made. And there is our complex pattern. So you can see I only started with, you know, a handful of motifs. It was 5 motifs or something, but it looks like there is more going on just because these shapes are all recolored. And, you know, this isn't ultimately how I would leave this pattern where I'm trying to finish it. The repeat looks a little bit too obvious to me with that bold maroon in the flower and that one blue stem shape. I think that would need to be repeated somewhere, but this is a good example for how to kind of troubleshoot and figure out how to make your complex design work. So I would go back, I would just delete this. I'm not going to do it right now, but just for your own personal knowledge, what I would probably do at this point, since I didn't love how it was repeating, would be to just shift things around, move things around, maybe change these colors a little bit so the maroon isn't quite so prominent, maybe something like that, or maybe like that, and add another one of these blue stems somewhere, you know, maybe like in there, and move these around somehow, something like that. So again, I'm not going to go into all that detail right now because we have more important things to do than making the perfect repeat right now. For now, I just want you to practice copying repeats, changing their colors, rotating them, reflecting them, changing their scale, arranging them into some kind of complex repeat, and then seeing how that repeat actually works once you're looking at it in a larger square. And then we will move on.